afternoon. My name is Lisa Brown Alexander, and I'm the CEO of Nonprofit HR. I'm delighted to be a part of the Elevate conference this year and think it's just an amazing idea to do this virtual conference so that you can participate from wherever you are. Today, we're going to focus on building a 21st century workforce and explore some of the important things that are happening in today's nonprofit workforce. This is me. I'm Lisa Brown Alexander. I'm the CEO of Nonprofit HR, and really delighted to be here this afternoon. My company, Nonprofit HR, is a full service, total lifecycle solutions company based in Washington, D.C. We've been serving the social sector for over 19 years now and serve as a trusted advisor and thought partner to hundreds of nonprofits and social impact organizations around the country. We've served hundreds of missions in the last 19 years, including health and human services, arts and culture, education, advocacy, and so many other nonprofit and social sector organizations. We're thrilled to be a part of this community and delighted to be a part of this conference today. Today, we're going to dive into a conversation about building a 21st century workforce and some of the things that are required to do so. We're going to spend some time talking about talent strategies, culture and engagement, performance management, and learning as a way of helping you drive success in your organization from a talent perspective. So when we talk about this term talent management, what are we really talking about? What does that mean, talent management? You may have a term or a definition for talent management that may vary from the organization next to yours. But at the end of the day, talent management is really about helping organizations manage the people and cultivate the asset that they have in people through attraction, healthy culture, ensuring engagement and retention, maximizing performance, fostering learning, and ensuring appropriate rewards. That's talent management. A lot of what we're going to talk about today will come from Nonprofit HR's third annual Talent Management Priorities Survey. This is a survey we've been conducting for the last 3 years as a way of getting more talent-related data to the nonprofit sector. We had our largest response to date in 2019 with over 488 organizations participating in the survey. And what we learned from it, I hope will help you today. So let's get started. One of the things we learned from the survey was that there were 3 primary priorities among nonprofit organizations when it comes to talent acquisition and recruitment. The first was that attracting and hiring diverse talent across all demographic groups, including but not limited to race, age, gender, identity, and different abilities, was a leading priority among nonprofits. As a second priority, we learned that strengthening organizations' internal capacity around how to bring people into the organization through effective interviewing skills was the second priority. It's one thing to have a vacancy. It's an entirely different thing to know how to fill that vacancy with the right person. And then third priority was helping organizations really leverage their social equity and their social brand as a way of attracting talent, right? So strengthening your employer brands to attract people to the organization, leveraging that mission and the vision and the values to attract people to want to apply and work for their organization. So these were the 3 priorities that we heard from nonprofits across the country. In response to that, we looked a little deeper into the data and really found that there were some emerging trends that we think will be helpful for you as you think about strategies, talent acquisition, and recruitment strategies for your organization. The first and probably the most obvious one is that the days of a homogeneous workplace are over, or at least ending, right? The country's demographics are changing, and it's critically important that nonprofits, just like every other sector in the country, be ready to respond to those changing demographics. We also expect to see a greater urgency around the leveling of gender imbalances, particularly at the leadership levels among nonprofit organizations. Part of this is being driven by the Me Too movement, but the other part of it is that the sector, the nonprofit sector, has long had imbalance in its management levels when it comes to men and women. We know that over 70% of the nonprofit workforce is comprised of women. Yet at the leadership level, those numbers are inverse, right? We have far fewer numbers of women in senior management positions across the sector and across subsectors than we do really anywhere else. And so we want to be sure, and we're seeing from organizations and hearing from organizations that there's a strong commitment to leveling the playing field, not only from a pay perspective, but just in terms of position. I want to move to the next point. We're seeing organizations really move beyond the beer test. What do I mean by that, right? When it comes to cultural fit when hiring. That means going beyond feeling comfortable with someone. Could this be someone I could share a beer with, or if you're more of a wine drinker, the wine test? Is this someone I could sit down and enjoy a conversation with as the sole criteria for determining who's going to fit into your organization? More and more organizations are yearning for diversity and recognize that in order to maximize diversity, there has to be a different approach when it comes to organizations bringing people in and ensuring a cultural fit. It's more than just did you go to the right school, or did you go to the school I went to, but will you fit into the organization from a mission and vision standpoint, and using some real objective criteria for making that determination. As a fourth point, and an insight into the survey, we learned that more and more organizations are finding it necessary to make deeper investments in effective interviewing skills and really raising the consciousness, the awareness, the skill level of those involved in bringing people into the organization from an interview standpoint. And so what we're seeing is more and more organizations wanting to train their staff, their hiring staff, those who are responsible for interviewing, around things like unconscious bias, effective interviewing skills, being sure that they understand legal and illegal questions to ask. So we're seeing a heightened awareness for that type of learning. And then finally, we're seeing that more and more organizations, without a clear job seeker value proposition, are not attracting top talent. What do I mean by that? That means that if you've not clearly articulated in your organization why someone should come on board, what they're going to get out of the experience, and ensure that their candidate experience is a rich one, you will find yourself on the tail end of the talent pool. We're in a very tight labor market right now, and those organizations that have clearly articulated their employer brand and how to bring people into their organizations effectively are the ones who are winning. So how do we make all of this actionable? What are maybe some tips that you can use in your organization as you look to strengthen your talent acquisition practices? Here are just a few. So one of the things we encourage that you do is to really document the business case for and work with leadership to prioritize developing talent, acquisition, and diversity strategies into your organization. Get leadership to buy into the value of diversity and inclusion. Why does it matter to your organization, and how will better diversity and inclusion practices advance your mission, make you more impactful in the communities where you're serving, right? So working with leadership to make a clear business case for that. We also recommend that you audit the gender composition of your leadership and your staff. You may have a sense for where people are, but until you really look at the numbers and quantify where people fall in the totem pole in your organization, you really don't have the objective data. Put that data in front of your leadership and ask them tough questions about, how you move things forward, how you shift whatever gender imbalances there may be, and perhaps it's not the men to women ratio on the leadership team. Perhaps it's the men to women ratio at the staff level. You may have 90% women on your staff and 10% men. How can you balance that out if gender balance is a priority for your organization? You can really replace gender composition with racial composition, identity composition, background, whatever meets your diversity and inclusion aspirations as an organization. But audit that. look at the composition of your workforce and take a look to see where you might have some imbalance. We also recommend that you spend some time training your interview teams on effective hiring and unconscious bias. It's one thing to sit around the table and assess a candidate. It's another thing to be sure that you've checked your own biases against the requirements of the position. And so, uh, training your staff to be aware and to be conscious of their biases as part of the interview process can only help to improve your outcomes from a candidate perspective, making sure that you really evaluated candidates fairly and consistently. And of course, it always helps to use a structured interview process, right? So just sharing some tactics that you can use to improve your talent acquisition practice. One of the things you might also consider doing is auditing your organization's website. Partner with your marketing team and make sure that the messages that you put out about your culture, your mission, your vision, and your values are also reiterated on the landing page where you speak to potential job seekers. And if by chance your website has no language speaking to the job seeker, create that space. It's really essential. If I'm considering working for your organization, but I go to your website and nothing speaks to me as a job seeker and you only speak to me as the donor, you've missed an opportunity in today's world, right? The expectation among job seekers now is that they can go to your website and find language that will speak to them, that will resonate to them about the opportunities that exist in your organization. And then finally, consider rewriting some of your recruitment messages or social media campaigns and be specific about targeting the type of job seekers that you're looking for. Use the platform that you likely already have through your website, your Facebook page, Instagram account if you have one as an organization, LinkedIn, all of those portals and channels. Use them to focus on attracting talent to your organization. So these are just some tactics and some recommendations that we have for organizations as they consider and as you consider improving your talent acquisition practices. In terms of culture and engagement, our survey revealed 3 priorities that organizations have when it relates to this space. The first is really improving organizational culture. We find that a lot of organizations, despite having lofty missions, need some improvement around their culture. And we know that culture is a key component to staff retention. We'll talk about that in a second, and engagement, but ensuring that you have a healthy workplace culture, eliminating conflict, reducing dysfunction, improving communication are all strategies that we see successful organizations use. So that's a leading priority among nonprofits across the country. The second priority was assessing organizational culture. Now, I would argue that you probably want to assess your culture before you strive to improve it, because you want to really know what's going on, what parts of your culture are broken before you seek to improve them, right? So, but this is the response that we got from folks out in the field, that as a second priority, assessing organizational culture, meaning understanding the values, making sure that workplace behavior and attitudes are in check, that leaders are effective and seen as effective in their roles, and that communication flows effectively in the organization. Assessing how each of those pieces work is a real priority for many organizations across the country. And then as a third priority, developing employee retention strategies, meaning specific plans for how you keep those people in your organization who are the highest performers. So we want to make sure that we get that across, that culture and engagement priorities fall into these 3 areas for at least 488 organizations across the country. Question is, what are your organizational priorities as it relates to culture and engagement? If you're looking for some strategies to use, we recommend some of the following. First, that you prioritize culture as a key driver for success in your organization. Those organizations that are doing great work from a mission perspective, but who are broken inside, see a negative impact on their ability to carry out their mission. So it's really important to focus on culture and make sure that your organization has a healthy one. Those that do have healthy workplace cultures, the data reveal that those organizations are those that are most likely to either achieve or surpass their goals and also have higher levels of engagement as it relates to their employees. So there's a direct value proposition for investing in your organization's culture and making sure that you eliminate those things that work against goal attainment and work against employee disengagement. In terms of other insights that we learned from this part of our survey, we learned that organizations that fail to objectively assess their cultures will really operate at a talent disadvantage, right? Not only from a talent perspective, but also programmatically. If you don't really know what's going on in your organization, if you've not formally assessed it, how can you fix it? And if you can't fix it or you don't fix it, it stands to kind of eat out your organization from the inside out, right? So it's really important to objectively assess your culture. You could do that through a cultural needs assessment, a series of surveys, focus groups, whatever works for you. But organizing yourselves around culture assessment is a really important priority that we have seen work well for organizations. The employee experience is really taking center stage, as is the candidate experience. But in the context of culture and engagement, the employee experience is critical, excuse me, a critical factor to employee engagement in today's workplace. So as you think about what you're doing in your organization, ask employees what their experience is like working with you. And there where you find holes, work to close those holes, to fill those holes as a strategy for keeping your best talent and for attracting new talent. And then finally, our experience is the organizations that have a plan, a specific retention plan and engagement plan, are those that are able to keep their talent. So nonprofits that have a plan for keeping their top talent actually do. Let's continue. Excuse me. All right, so let's spend some time talking about some additional strategies and tactics that you can use around culture. Be sure to clearly define your desired culture. Spend some time with leadership, with staff, talking through the kind of culture that you want to have, and then determining whether or not the current state of your culture is really what you want. Hold senior leaders accountable for modeling the desired culture. What does that mean? Embed it into your performance management process. Push for action when leaders don't emulate the culture that's desired. And I know this is a big task, so and probably a conversation unto itself. But one of the reasons that we see culture efforts fall down is because the leadership don't model and don't buy into the process of culture improvement. So finding some ways to put teeth into your culture management process is really, really critical. What we also know is that there are kind of 5 key factors to influencing engagement in organizations. And they include having a clear strategy, communicating that strategy across your organization, having effective workplace tools, meaning the resources and the stuff that people need to get the work done, ensuring that people are fitting into the culture. And it doesn't mean everyone has to look the same and come from the same place. It just means that everyone can kind of align themselves around the mission and fit in a way that's healthy together to drive that mission forward. Having talented coworkers is another factor of engagement. And then finally, having growth opportunities for folks to move across and through the organization, not necessarily up, but through the organization, continuing to have enriching experiences. And then finally, regularly communicating the link between leadership and employee engagement and organizational performance are really critical factors and good strategies for ensuring a healthy culture and high levels of employee engagement. Let's keep moving. When we asked about performance management, we learned that there were 3 priorities among the organizations that participated in the survey. The leading priority around performance management was implementing training and development initiatives aimed at strengthening managers' ability to give feedback. One of the things we know is that as our workforce kind of ages down, meaning gets younger, more and more people in the workforce crave and want regular ongoing feedback. Yet, when we have an older workforce, or not even an older workforce, but a less experienced workforce, a workforce that is not kind of adept at providing feedback, there's a disconnect. And so, implementing, training programs around helping our managers give better feedback is a priority for 46% of those who participate in our survey. As a second priority, we learned that shifting from a traditional kind of event-driven, once-a-year performance management model to more continuous feedback models was a high priority for many organizations, 35% of those who participated. And then finally, restructuring existing performance management programs and systems was the third highest priority among those who participate in our survey. So how do we bring that to light? Well, we know that best practice is really shifted from once a year event-driven performance management conversations to continuous feedback. You can find that data everywhere. More and more employees are demanding and thriving under continuous feedback models versus event-driven ones. We know that there's a correlation between the frequency of performance management conversations and performance management effectiveness, right? So the more that people are talking about performance and how to improve it and the things that might be getting in the way of performance, the better we're seeing performance results across organizations. We also know that improving manager skill around giving and receiving feedback is really essential to getting employee buy-in and getting employees to see the value of performance management. And many right now do not. Many managers don't see the value of performance management. And then finally, learning how to coach. So giving your managers the skills to coach their staff is another thing, a trend that we're seeing within the nonprofit sector. So how do you make this actionable? What are some tools tactics that you can use? First, getting buy-in from your leadership, getting them to understand why performance management is important if they don't already. As a first step, and then one that we're strongly encouraging organizations to do, is shift from that annual performance management discussion to a more frequent model. And of course, before doing it, you've got to weigh the pros and cons in your organization, whether or not there's a readiness to do that. You can do that more effectively by using more technology, moving away from paper-based systems, and really investing in helping your managers be ready to give and receive performance-related feedback, right? And then finally, as a tool for employee well-being, really ensuring that staff know the outlets that exist for managing stress in the workplace, which ultimately can impact their performance. We're winding up with our time, but I wanted to just touch base on some priorities that we heard from the social sector around learning and development, professional development, you may call it in your organization. The leading priority among those who participated in the survey this year was that they wanted to really expand their investments in developing and strengthening teams, right? More and more organizations are moving toward team-based approaches for getting work done. But in order to work as a team, you have to kind of know the skills and competencies needed to be an effective team member. And so what we're hearing is that organizations are really investing more money into driving and having team-based learning in their organization. We also heard from those who participated that developing a learning and development strategy, having a formal program and strategy in their organization was the second priority. And as the third priority, really investing more and expanding investments in leadership development programs, right? So those learning efforts that are directed toward the leadership in the organization and emerging leaders, growing them. In terms of insights and implications, what we really see from nonprofit HR's perspective is that really more and more organizations will push to get more and more done through teams versus individuals. And so developing and strengthening teams are really going to be essential to organizational success as we go forward. We also know that peer-to-peer learning, mentoring, mobile learning will continue to really dominate the landscape of kind of best employee development learning methods. Micro-learning is another space, meaning short bursts of information aimed at improving employee skill. So quick learning kind of bites for people rather than days and days at conferences or workshops. And even a session like today is an good example of micro-learning. We also see that leadership development, investments will continue to make up a significant portion of organizations' learning budgets. So as opposed to them, organizations investing across the board around learning and development, meaning learning aimed at all levels of staff, most nonprofit organizations will prioritize and set aside majority of their learning and development budgets for leadership development. So that's an important distinction and an observation that we've made over the years. And then finally, what's called the 70-20-10 model is really shifting to a more balanced approach, right? So 70-20-10 in the learning and development space refers to the mix of experiential learning, relational learning, and formal learning. And what we're finding is that rather than 70% of it being focused on experiential learning and 20% on relational learning, 10% on formal learning, that mix is changing to more like a 33% model. Don't have enough time to talk about that today, but just wanted to share that. We covered a lot in these 30 minutes. I hope it's been helpful. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out. Here's my contact information. I'd love to hear your story and learn how Nonprofit HR can help you. I want to thank the folks at the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance for putting this conference together, this virtual learning experience. It's been a great time. I've enjoyed my time with you today and hope that you found this helpful. All the best to you in your journey for sustainability and effectiveness in the communities that you serve.